Hello, everyone. I'm very happy today to have John Weidenbaum with us as the speaker for this new episode of Philosophy Gets Personal. John Weidenbaum is an educator who teaches classes in world religions, courses that he introduced to two institutions, ethics, philosophy, bioethics, medical humanities, and he thinks about and writes articles on topics including the philosophy of religion, classical American philosophy, and the philosophy of humor. He loves traveling and he tries to find an opportunity whenever it's possible to travel and to gain as much firsthand and immersive cultural experience as he can. He loves New York City, where he lives, and his city and his classrooms are a constant source of inspirations and ideas for his work. So, thank you, Jonathan, for being here today with us.
Susie, thank you for having me.
Look, I would start from here since I just read an incredibly beautiful article you wrote. I would just ask you if you can, if we can chat about this article. This article is strongly based on your life. And since you teach bioethics, you manage, and this is a bioethical article. So, for those who don't know, bioethics is the discipline that studies the interconnection between ethics and our life, with a strong accent on medical problems. And unfortunately, recently you had to live through a bioethical dilemma. And you know, when we read about bioethics, we always have a kind of a distant approach. It's a very mental, it's very cold. And when you live within a bioethical dilemma, it's anything but this. It's a place where emotions ride hide, and you have to consider them. Um, uh, I will not say anything more. If you want to give us, you know, the yeah, a sense of the structure of the article, what you've been through, and maybe we can talk about that a moment.
Sure, Susie. I've been teaching courses in bioethics for a long time, and ethics sections in general, a bioethics section in general ethics classes as well for even longer. And of course, you get in front of a class, you come up with classic scenarios from history, Terry Schiavo, Dax Coward, some of the classic stories that come from the history of ethical, controversies in medicine. And then, of course, one semester when I'm teaching two different courses in bioethics, both are honors courses at each institution I teach at. My beautiful wife, at the end of November, the weekend of Thanksgiving, that we discovered where her labored breathing came from. She had tumors all over her chest, and a month later, she passed away. This was the end of December. She died, and so there was a period of time. It was about 4 or 5 days. It was, believe it or not, Christmas Day, 2022, when the doctors told me she was on her deathbed, and 4 days later she passed. And and then there was a whole, her poor parents. I don't want to go into too much detail about the background, but this is the second child they had lost. They had lost another child when Kasha was much younger. They understandably, that it's the almost impossibility. I mean, look, my heart will be broken forever, but the parents, to lose a child, it's a different world, and of grief. And
They are very religious. I mean, they are from a Polish background, from what I understood.
yeah, I'm not sure how. It's interesting because I'm not so sure if they're not like avid churchgoer type religious, but
Okay.
still, yes, they come from this this ethnic cultural heritage in which it's very Catholic to its core. Of course, interestingly enough, the Catholic moral teaching, as because you teach bioethics and you study natural law theory and things like, theories like this, states that you should not keep someone artificially alive,
Mhm.
beyond the
Yeah.
point of no return. You're not encouraged, you're encouraged to let nature take its course after a certain point. Hope I stated that correctly. But so so there was a circle of friends of my late wife who kind of wanted a miracle to happen, and did not want the machine shut off, and they influenced the parents. And I don't blame the parent. I don't really blame. There's no villain in this story. There's
Mhm.
just human beings trying to come to terms with what is impossible to come to terms with. And my late wife is not even 42 years. She just turned 42. I mean, it's a
Oh
young
God.
person. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, of course, palliative care instructed me that, well, the palliative care spoke to the whole family, but they singled me out because as the husband, it was really the decision is legally on me. They were encouraging me, I think rightly, to have the machine shut off, that it was, beyond the point of no return, that there was nothing good can come of keeping her on. Um, my wife had reached the end of her life, so they were encouraging me to have the machine shut off. And as a duty to my wife, I had a number of reasons to agree with them. First of all, they're medical doctors. They were telling me what's going on in her body. And let's just say I was torn between two duties: the duty to my wife, and I think that all things considered, would have been better to have the machine shut off. But at the same time, I felt another duty to her parents who were not ready yet. And I don't hold that duty as strong as a duty to my wife, but nonetheless, it was a duty nonetheless. So I was torn between
Of
this.
course.
And over a period of 4 or 5 days, let's say about 4 days. Um, and then finally, of course, the story gets long. I don't know how much the story you want, but she died anyway on the machine. I mean, her heart gave out, and as the doctors told me. But at least four different occasions, palliative care came to me to tell me to have the machine shut off. And about, let's say, three and a half of those times, I kept saying, "Not yet, not yet, not yet."
I mean, something that made your article very human is how you tell these days. I mean, how you
Yes.
narrate the story, because on one day you are there in an ICU, which is, as you rightly say in the article, a sacred space,
Oh, I
because
do. I consider it
there
that.
are plenty of lives that are in between,
Yeah.
in
Yes.
very important
Oh,
transition, and around you there are the friends of your wife, and more or less each one of them feels in the position to tell you, well,
yeah.
you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
heard of people that come back, and then these
Exactly.
opinions
Yeah.
start influencing the parents who
Yes.
are, of course, themselves for the well of your wife, but at the same time, they are very vulnerable because they just came to the US without much of a
Yeah.
network, and so
Yeah.
your wife was the main caregiver for them.
He was.
There are different layers
Yeah.
in
There were
these
many
days that
layers.
come to the surface.
That's right. There were many layers to the story. I mean, my wife was her parents. She was the surviving child. She was the only child because she was the surviving child. As I mentioned, she had lost her younger brother decades earlier. She facilitated their immigration to the States about 11 years earlier, or 11 or 12 years prior. She was their translator. She arranged their medical appointments. We just cautioned, my wife and I just purchased a home about a year and 7 months earlier, and that was largely she wanted to make a base for her parents who lived downstairs. And so this story has so many levels and layers to it, and that's right. And so, yeah,
And
they're,
what shocked me is that the doctors at some point proposed you, you know,
yeah,
we can help you to solve this dilemma since we see you that you want to give space to the parents,
yeah,
but at the same time you believe
yeah,
that it's fair for her
yeah,
to not feel pain and to not be here.
yeah,
We can unplug the machine and we would
yes,
say,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah, that's right.
up to
That's right.
us.
It's amazing, though. I mean, I'm partly to blame along the way. At my morally weakest, I wanted to offload the decision to them, and they said so much to me that, hey, listen, offload it to us. Say that we're making you do it. But of course, that there's something dishonest about that because it is my legal decision, and I just kind of didn't want to be the bad guy. I wanted the machine shut off because the idea of the idea of my wife potentially being kept alive indefinitely and artificially, which is not something she would have wanted. There was also the possibility, as made clear to me, her main care doctor at Perlmutter and NYU said I shouldn't even worry about her suffering anything. She was so sedated while she was intubated, but there were doctors on the floor that said no, we can't necessarily confirm that. We can't know that for sure. The nervous system is a
Might feel
complex thing.
pain.
Yeah, there might be some discomfort going on, which is a polite way of saying agony, and I could not live knowing that that's
Pretend idea. Yeah.
even if it was a small possibility, I could not live with that. So I wanted the machine shut off sooner rather than later. But yes, I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to, decades to roll on with the parents and the circle of friends seeing me as a monster, which is not the most. That's not the truly moral reason why I kept staving off palliative care. And I also feel a duty that gosh, my wife's parents have to. This means something, but still, I kind of did resonate to it when some of the palliative care doctors said to me, listen, offloaded the decision to us and just say that we're kind of making you do it, which of course Sartre called that bad faith. You want to
Mhm.
sort of
Yeah.
elude responsibility over yourself and kind of objectify yourself and say, no, I'm being made to do such and such, but you're not. You are it would be ironically it would be me freely giving them my freedom, in order to claim that I had no choice, but it's just not the case. So eventually I snapped out of it, I'm happy to say. And this is the last time palliative care met with me one-on-one. I said to them, no, I'm still gonna, we want to wait at least one more day because I gave the father 2 days on Wednesday, 2 more days. Believe it or not, he had to work that week. You know,
That's the other
and
thing that
the
was
week is what
shocking.
his daughter was on life support. He had to work.
Oh,
It's like there's no, I don't even know how to put that in the words. But uh but Thursday morning, palliative care said to me, listen, we're looking at everything here, what's going on with her body. She only has 24 hours left, and it could be in the middle of the night with only a nurse in the room with her. And I said, okay, fine, then it's Thursday, it's
why
not Friday,
didn't
but
they? So they don't allow you to be there if it's, the
oh
last,
no,
last day.
yeah, but the point is that she would perish too quickly. In other words, it's of course, if it looks like she's gonna go within an hour or something, yeah, they would call me, as they did with my father 20 years ago. I saw my father also die of cancer. But the uh for my wife, it just they don't know when. In fact, while I finally said fine, tonight around 5 o'clock, I'm gonna have the machine shut off, and of course around 3:30, around late afternoon, I'm pacing back and forth in front of the hospital because I'm just, what would happen later? I mean, now I would, the parents, I told them already, I informed them I'm going to Uber them to the hospital because I don't want them driving home after. And they would they all of a sudden resist? Would they all of a sudden start screaming? Would they all of a sudden say, no, don't remove the machine? Would a fight break? I mean, who knows what would happen? I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah.
I teach bioethics, but you're not, to have this on your shoulders. But then what happens is I'm pacing back and forth, and I get a bunch of fevered texts from one of Kasha's friends who's by her bedside at the moment, saying, John, you better come up right now. And then I ran up, just ran past the front desk, hopped on the elevator, ran to the room, and then her heart was giving out right then and there. The lung was pressing against the heart or something like this. And then she died, So exactly 3:50 p.m. So, in an hour and 10 minutes before I was going to have the machine shut off. And so I was absolved from having to
Make the choice.
carry through. Yeah, I was absolved from having to carry through with that decision. And as you may imagine, people from different angles are telling me, but the supernatural reason that she actually passed, So I get some that says, well, she wants to rescue you from having to make that difficult decision. But I can imagine someone on the opposite side saying, well, she was not going to let you kill her, so she died before.
Mhm.
So it's like, what do you do? I don't know. It ended, look, maybe score for the biologists and for the medical doctors who told me that morning that she was going to be within 24 hours, she was going to die. They called it, and they were right, and she did. And so, and that's kind of where my bet is. She just her the lung was gone, and then the pressure on the heart finally kind of took her.
I was about just to say that two things impressed me when I was reading. One, the speed at which
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
happened. So you received a phone call. I mean, it's through a
yeah.
phone call that you had to make the decision to intubate her or not,
That's right.
which
That's
is
right. That's right.
extremely difficult
Yeah,
and frustrating because intubation
right.
is most of the time a decision you cannot come back from.
Yeah,
I mean, it's half-half. It can lead to, okay, then
yeah,
uh, she recover, or it can lead to the decision of official life supported for who knows how long.
yeah.
And the last sentence of your article, when you describe your mother-in-law
That's
choosing
right.
the clothes for her,
Yeah,
the favorite red dress,
yeah.
and
That's right.
you can finally let yourself feeling her absence, and
Yeah.
you're choking. I mean, your heart is melting, and you don't know how to say this to your students, how to convey this to your student, which is
I,
exactly the point.
yeah. Yeah. Although, on the one hand, some of them have been through it too. I mean, I've had students over the years
Yeah.
that lost their children. I've had students over the years, of course, they lose their parents, they lose their siblings. I have students who are vets that come back from war, and lose their, brothers and sisters in arms, so you have the whole gamut of
Mhm.
personalities and vocations and backgrounds who may have know what tragedy is and who've lived through these things. Nonetheless, truly, Susie, truly, it's the truth. Nothing teaches you about how layered and complex the psyche is than
Mm.
grief.
Mm.
Because to be perfectly honest with you, now it's about what is it, 8 months now, 8 or 9 months now. And I'm having sadder moments now than I did, sort of within the past, than I did maybe a month or two after she passed, because it now all of a sudden this after she passed, of course, there's a memorial and funeral. Then I had to sell the house, because I went from a two
Yeah.
income situation to a one income situation, and that was a lot entailed with that, a lot of, and so busy mode, and all of us. So now that's all out of the way, and I'm free of some of those ordeals. But then for that reason, for that very reason, now I get those moments, where is she? Where did she go? It's amazing. After my father passed 20 years ago, after like a month or so, he started appearing in my dreams. He was in my dreams for a good 15 years after he passed. And in the world of the dream, he was never gone to begin with, unfortunately. So I never had the chance to say, Dad, you're back. What's the afterlife like? Give me because in the world of the dream, he was never gone to begin with. So it's just, there he is with his Brooklyn accent, John, at the kitchen table, he never went anywhere. But who
Mhm.
knows what's going to happen? I mean, gosh, my wife will always be in my heart, and so so who knows the course this will take a year from now, 2 years from now. But yeah, grief teaches you this. It teaches you it's a complex thing, and but there are certain images that are seared into my brain because I'm alongside her parents and watching this process happen, to be in the room with them when they see their daughter as a corpse for the first time, and for me it's not an easy thing either, as you may imagine. So and that's that. But in any case, so as someone who teaches about bioethics, it's interesting because one of the rather decent moments over the years, this even before my wife got sick and passed, for in regards to affording me, some sort of another sort of level of teaching the subject matter of bioethics. So Terry Schiavo is a name that I'm sure you're familiar with, and of the young woman who had a heart attack and stroke in 1990, but in 2005 they finally pulled the feeding tube on her after 15 years of battling it out in the courts. And Michael Scheiber, the husband, wanted the feed tube removed. The parents did not. But when you throw it up as a scenario to a room full of students, it's one thing. But then a good video came out in retrospect many years after, which actually where you meet the parents and you see them, and you meet Michael Scheiber. Not literally, I mean, he doesn't introduce himself to the camera, but you see them, and then you discover that it's not like, the good guys versus a villain, but you see two human worldviews, and you see it in the flesh, and you see these are human beings that really truly come from a perspective. Michael Shiva wanting a kind of closure and for his wife that he loved, and the parents, loving their child. So it's important to show the human element, that there's something that it's like to actually be in the shoes of someone undergoing a kind of phenomenology, if you will, of living through an issue of bioethics. And so, in the least pleasant possible way, of course, and I have been introduced to that. I mean, there was a slightly lighter version of it 20 years ago when the doctor said to my family, listen, we can save, my dad's, one of the cancer had hit one of the vital organs, but then the doctor said to us, we can do something heroic and save that organs, but then it's going to be possibly more painful in a few months from now, and it was really no decision, but this is a different story because here there was a real tussle for a while.
One thing I appreciated in reading your article, now it's a mandatory reading for my students, by the way.
Oh, okay.
If I told you, is that you cite Kant.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
source, which, yeah, of course, it can give you some comfort to decide, but then it can use in so many ways because, Kant
Right.
tells us, for our listeners who don't know him, that there's a categorical imperative to respect the dignity, the humanity in the person in front of us, which is an absolutely right thing to do and to say. But then, in which one of the two sides will you use Kant?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting because if anyone ever says to you, and we get this as professional philosophers
Yeah.
sometimes, how does this theory relate to life?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're damn right it does relate to life because, of course, I had made a passing remark to one of the head of palliative care at this hospital that I teach the subject matter. But then at one point, this is around the second time he cornered me, that he wanted to kind of he
Mm-hmm.
wanted me to have the machine shut off, and he said to me, can I talk to you philosopher to philosopher? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
of course. And he goes, and he invoked Immanuel Kant and the second most, clear when we teach Immanuel Kant, there's a whole number of versions of the categorical imperative, and of course, for the listeners, the generally speaking, we tend to offer two of them as the most sort of well known. One is that you should follow that maxim, you could will to become a universal law, that is universalizable. You would have everyone else do the same thing in that same situation. But the second one is to treat everyone as possessing intrinsic worth, not instrumental, not as means to an end, but as ends in themselves. And so that's the one. The second one is the one he invokes. That I should, and of course, his how he was applying it was that, your wife, it's all about her and her existential dignity, as he put it, not what would please or the friends or the parents or give them some kind of it's about her and her needs, and that's why you should have the machine shut off. And so I mean, look, so yeah, he invoked that, and of course, the other theories make their way in as well. Like, there was definitely a contingent among the friends that wanted her to remain on the machine that would invoke miracle type things, and they were religious in a very kind of folk piety kind of sense. And I say that without any condescension, but of course, but in the Roman Catholic tradition that they were all in, there is a body of philosophical ethics. This is called natural law theory, that there are purposes built into nature. We should realize those purposes. And natural law theory actually in the Catholic Church holds, and I hope I'm not mistaken on this, that the machine should be shut off. That you should not artificially extend someone's life beyond the point of no return. That's something to consider too. And of course, it's incredible how ideas do fit life, and they have a concrete bearing on it. And these are all things to consider when you're in the midst of a concrete situation. But at the same time, I mean, look, it's one of those things you can look at it from more than one angle. I mean, at the same time, sometimes the messiness and complexity of life also eludes the simplicity of theory as well.
Yeah.
So, so the fact that the doctor would invoke the theory, trying to promote me to do something, is relevant in regards to the relationship of theory to life. But the fact, of course, the complexity of the situation, and like you mentioned, like who's duty can be multifaceted. I had a duty for my wife, but I had a duty to Kasha's parents too. That I could not so easily flout their wishes either. That means something. And so I'm between these two worlds here.
Especially for considering how difficult it was for them to express
Yeah.
themselves in English because their first language is Polish.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. The doctor,
people,
at one point, head of palliative care, he unfolded the sheet of numbers to call, of professional translators. We had one of Kasha's friends who works in the medical field call and FaceTime the parents, and then we also, and luck of all luck, one of the nurses on staff was a Polish woman from the same region as my wife.
oh wow, okay.
I goosebumps appear on my neck when I say this. My hair stands on end. My wife's last conversation on this earth was with a woman from the same region of Poland as she was from.
Incredible.
And we know my wife's last words. We know she said to the nurse when they were intubating, she said, "Look out for my parents. Tell them I'm okay." She was so concerned with not. I mean, of course, she believed also that she would come out, and then she would come home and have her cancer battle, and of course, that was not to be. So yeah, no, there's so many. It was I didn't sleep much those 4 or 5 days. There was so many layers and angles on this, on that event, on that long, complex event,
And now, how are you holding up? I mean, is philosophy serving you in some way? What's
Philosophy.
your way? Yeah.
It always serves me. It's I to come to terms with lack of closure on our knowledge of the world. Where do we go when we pass? Then the tension between what we want and faith and what our reason tells us and the way they grind together, what Unamuno called the tragic sense of life, that yearning for that spiritual yearning, that but yet one that's not supported by reason but grinds against it. Uh, philosophy is and almost and is a whole number of lenses that I can put on to see the world from different angles whenever I need to help contextualize in a much deeper sense all the different facets that we live through. And so of course the house was sold. I'm in a new beautiful neighborhood in Harlem in New York City. I'm really a city person. I'm not meant for this.
Yeah.
I could have continued in the suburbs with my wife, and her family, her parents living downstairs. We could have done it for a minute, but not without her. I don't like to drive. I'm a driver. Hop on the subway. So yeah, I'm happy to be back in the
In
city
the
and
city.
where I belong. And of course, no silver lining can erase that dark cloud. I mean, I would rather have her back, but given that the circumstances of my life are pretty decent at the moment. I'm
Oh, I'm glad.
employed. I'm in a great neighborhood. I enjoy the city life. And listen, we're philosophers. Plato taught us, that although in a different kind of mode than simply giving life. I mean, Plato argued that our lives are one of dying even in the midst of life, of course. But even if I don't completely buy the ascetic flavor he brings to the Phaedo, but nonetheless, death is, or the Heideggerian notion of anticipating our own mortality. I mean, this is just what it, as philosophers are rightly preoccupied with mortality and death, and sort of weaning whatever meaning we can in the face of it, on the face of the fact we're finite beings, even though some philosophers claim we have something that we're not totally finite, as Plato and the Phaedo argues. But still, I think the point being that, this is part of my calling, of my discipline, to come to terms with mortality. And and here that is that I live up to my calling, even in the midst of most painful life circumstances. But I mean, you make the most, and life is still meaningful. And
The last question of our talk and interview. Uh,
okay.
what is the meaning? I mean, if life has a meaning, what would be the meaning of life, you think?
My goodness gracious.
I
What
know.
a question. What a question. Have to invoke something that some philosophers too often forget, and that's a little bit of humility.
Mm.
Uh, I'm not going to pretend to be able to put a fence around a final answer for that, because if anything, this recent event with my wife and and events before and after, meanings keep flowing in, So I consider myself the opposite of a nihilist. If a one of my dear friends is a philosophical nihilist, and I'm not opposing myself to him because he probably has a much richer notion of what nihilism is. But let's just say, sort of, the basic idea of nihilism, that there's nothing inherently meaningful, and I'm the opposite of that. I think life is suffused with meaning, even in the absence of any apparent overarching metaphysical meaning. And I'm not neglecting that either. What the world religions have to tell us, whether we're stuck in the wheel of birth and death, or whether there's a loving God or a transcendental ground, or, these are all, to consider. But even in the absence of knowing which of those models are the correct ones, still our ordinary lives. I mean, there's an atmosphere to this room, to this conversation, to the experiences I had with my wife, to the nagging, that this thing that sticks in my side, that reminding me, where is she? I was just by her side, and now she's gone. I'm moving toward that door too, and all the way in which that fact resonates in our experience, just about being in a body, in a world, life is suffused with levels and layers of meaning, and I don't want to say, and I can't say that I have a kind of a hold on it in such a way that here it is, here is the meaning of life.
Mm.
Maybe we should invoke a little bit of pluralism, when we speak about and speak of meanings, you
Mhm.
know. So I don't know. I hope that it wasn't too much of a cop out, that answer.
No, it makes sense. I mean, meaning is what you find meaningful in that moment, in that encounter,
Yeah.
in what maybe doesn't make sense in that moment, but later on,
Yeah.
and it drives you in a direction instead of another. I can totally see that.
Like Kierkegaard said, life is understood backwards, but it has to be lived forwards.
Beautiful, yeah,
So yeah,
beautiful.
onrush of meaning. And you know who loved that quote? William James was
Ah,
told that
ah,
quote by somebody.
uh-huh.
But James is a tremendous influence on me.
I
You know,
know.
his
Tell us why.
yeah, yeah. So, and he was definitely a philosopher that spoke to a very heavily pluralistic sense of life's meanings, all coming at us from different ways. And he sought to tap into it from different angles, whether it was taking nitrous oxide or writing a religious experience or embodied worldly experience, all of these different avenues. So, he's someone, a thinker I resonate to naturally by way of personality and also simply by the beauty of his writing. But I think he is essential for this discussion as well.
And
Arguing.
he went through a severe mental breakdown for
Yeah,
a few years in his life. So
yeah,
he was someone who had to struggle to find his way back to
yeah.
something meaningful. The will to believe, I think it's one of,
Yes, well, that's one of his great ones, of course.
yeah.
But, at one point early on in his late youth or early manhood, or he was taking the question of determinism really personally seriously, and of course, and maybe we don't have free will, and it was an agonizing. And then he read the French writer Charles Renouvier, which I'm probably mispronouncing, and then William James says, my first act of free will should be to believe in free will, that kind of existential leap, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm,
and
yeah,
um, and some have argued that there's a sense in which the robustness of his prose and style of life was a kind of compensation for his struggle with depression and all other kind of maladies, and he would probably be the first to admit it, if he
yeah.
didn't there, so yeah, this is kind of he joins those long list of philosophers whose ideas and whose life kind of overlap in many ways.
It's kind of unique at that time,
Yeah,
and there aren't so many
yeah,
philosophers open
yeah.
to do it, which is what we try to do in this
Yes,
podcast, to
right.
see how philosophy and life intersect with each other and
Of
help us
course.
to get through. Anyway, thank you so much for opening up to us for this wonderful talk we had, and thanks again for joining us today.
Susie, thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation very much.